Switch. Yeah, I'm switched on. Who are the organisers here? Can they stand up, please? Yeah, only one organiser here. All the other ones are organising their hangovers somewhere. Can we just have a little bit of a round of applause? Because I know some of you are involved in organising conferences, but putting on a conference is a hell of a lot of work, and setting up and getting a new conference working is an amazing amount of work. So thank you all for doing that. Hi. We don't need testers. What we really need is testers. So before that, I need to get some feedback from the audience at some point. We're going to have a little competition. So I'm going to pick the person reading their iPad. There's one team captain. And I think you'll make a nice team captain here. Very simple test. Right, we've got two teams. This team and this team. You're up against each other. Everybody stand up. Right. When you have got both a green and a red card, you may sit down. The team that wins is the first team that everyone's got a green and a red card. Go! Some nice self-organisation going on there. Right, who's the first team to have everyone sitting down? Oh, let's see. I think it's this team that's the winner. I think what's particularly impressive though, has everyone now got a red card and a green card? Who hasn't got them? Hands up if you've not got them. So we've got some more up the front there. Yeah. So if you can distribute those to the people in your team. Okay. When you've got a red and a green card, just sit down, please. It's great because Agile is all about collaboration, but you'd be surprised just how easy it is to introduce competition into any organisation, even a bunch of collaborative testers. Hi, my name is Chris Matz. If you want to follow me and hear me say nothing on Twitter these days, you can do so. The name's on the card. Thank you for the introduction, very kind. I'm most known for something called Real Options, which is where we take applied psychology and financial mathematics and then apply it to IT project management and life. We take the two most boring subjects you can imagine and make it into something even more boring. Another thing I'm kind of known quite famously by about 3 people is feature injection, which is how do we do business analysis in an agile way so that we can do it fast. Who's heard of given when then? Yeah? That's weird because you're all on that side of the audience. Is this some kind of bias? Right? Oh no, we're all on down north side. You people are my people. Yeah, because you've not heard of it. So Dan North and I came up with this about 10 years ago, which is a pattern that's used quite a lot in automated testing. Dan North and I at the moment are working with Tony Grau's something called business mapping, which is more of a practitioner's approach to scaling Agile, and trying to solve some of the problems there. So we won't be creating any nice looking diagrams soon. So this is what is a tester. Can anyone see the difference between these two comic books? Yeah, I have one of these comic books. I'm a bit of a comic book nerd. Can anyone tell the difference between these two comic books? Yeah, anyone see? Yeah, so this this one's not quite as good quality as this one. Yeah, this one's kind of quite nice quality. This one's a little worse quality. And sometimes I feel this is the same for many roles in Agile, and in particular for the tester, is that when you look at them, they look very much the same. You know, this is kind of like almost like a good tester, and this is bad tester. But generally, when we look at them, they kind of appear the same. If you wanted to buy these two comic books, the value that they generate is very different. This one's worth just over $1 million because it's kind of in pristine condition. This is the really good stuff. Whereas this one is only worth $5,000. I wish I could tell you that the comic book that I own looked like this. Unfortunately, the comic book that I own looks very much like this one. But this is the thing. What is a tester? So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes because I want you to introduce yourself to the person you don't know sitting next to you. And I want you to just take 2 minutes to discuss what is a tester. Yeah? So off you go. 2 minutes, go. Does anyone have any strong opinions on this subject? Anyone care to share? If you're on this, he's sitting at the front. What do you mean, don't need testers? Oh, sorry. Can we have the mic on, please? No? Good. Can we have the mic on?
Maybe. There we go.
Okay. So what is a tester?
A tester is someone who's trying to collect empirical information about quality. Typically, I mean, you could put it in many directions, but generally we talk about a tester, we're talking about someone who's trying to get empirical information about the quality of the product to give that information to someone else or make some kind of judgment based on it.
Okay, cool. Anyone else with a strong opinion? I'm going to run around there. I'm going to come to you and then come to you.
Thank you, Chris. I think someone who asks questions, and those questions may lead to that kind of empirical information that you've got there. But I think also it's about being creative in asking those questions and getting the answers you might not necessarily expect, rather than being given a script upon it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tester is a voice for the customer.
You know what? These people just ruin my entire talk. Go on, ruin the rest of it. See if you can.
I think that testing is a facilitating of the development process. We're actually here to develop and develop stuff and do what others don't have time or what to do.
Yeah, you just ruined more of my talk.
I think they're like the kid in the story, The Emperor's New Clothes.
Oh, no. Okay, that's my talk. You can all go now. Okay, so what is a tester? When we think of testers in the traditional kind of context, we're kind of thinking in terms of that waterfall thing. So there was the analysis phase where the guys in the shiny suits, people like me, who are cleverer than everyone else on the project, we'd work out why we're doing this. Yeah, what do we want? What do we do? And then we'd hand it over to the designers, normally the IT designers, Yeah, the IT designers there were the developers that were really good, but no one wanted to work with, so we called them designers so they could work on their own. Then we have the coders. They were the ones who didn't like daylight or talking to other human beings. And then eventually there was this pile of mess dumped on the tester. And the tester's job was to take that production environment, wasn't it? Yeah. Thou shalt not pass, bug. But unfortunately, the only way you can prevent that bug from getting through is if you prevent all the software getting through. And so this sets up a really interesting dynamic on the project, doesn't it? As a tester, you gather this empirical evidence to show that, hey, you know what, this software isn't working the way we expected. And so you kind of eventually find all the evidence you need to prove categorically that this software is not working the way that we expected. And you go and talk to someone and say, hey, I found a bug. And what response do you get? Oh, sorry, what response do you get? All the builder. And so we gathered our empirical evidence to actually test to see that this thing is wrong. And what response do we get? These are not the bugs you're looking for. Yeah? They don't want to know, do they? And of course, we're testers, we don't give up that easy, do we? No, 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 no. Your Jedi mind tricks won't work on me. And so for some reason, the tester has kind of got this image of, tester says no. Yeah, so on a lot of projects, this is the image of testing. And in fact, it's not just projects, it's the whole organisation. And because on your project you're persecuted, you gather together in a group called the testing group. And your whole job is to say, no, you can't have that value in production. I think this is wrong. I think we're kind of, that whole setup has got it wrong. As a friend of mine, Darren Skurstein, said in 2008, I'm here to break the nice stuff as well as the nasty stuff. Yeah. So what is a tester? And I think one of the things that doesn't help is this way of thinking about the development of software. Because we don't really do that, do we? What really happens is the analyst, the shiny guy in the suit like me, or is it me, the guy in the shiny suit, does the analysis, and then when we finish, we hand it across, and no one would be crazy enough to wait for the for the coders. So we actually get the testers to pick up that analysis work at the same time that the developers pick up the analysis work, and then they work in parallel to speed things up, and then it all comes together in this test execution phase. So one of the things from Real Options that we came up with is this thing called information arrival. And what information arrival about is we don't look at necessarily the products moving through the system, we look at what points did information arrive into the system. And when it comes to software development projects, all of the information that arrives has to go through the code piece. So the valid information that we're receiving, it has to go through that code piece so that we have the product we want in production. So let's look at analysis. Any information that arrives in the analysis phase flows nicely through. So it goes through the code, but the information flows through the test prep and everything is good. And in fact, any information that arrives during the coding phase, when the developers are looking at those requirements and they think of things that the analyst hasn't thought of, which is very rare in my situation, anything they discover, that goes through the code phase and ends up in production. The problem, of course, is with the test preparation, because the only way that it gets into the code phase is it goes through the test execution. We find that actually this isn't working the way we expect, and it creates this loop. And this loop is a nightmare. So have any of you done flow or Kanban type stuff? Yeah. The problem with this loop is it means that you cannot predict when the work's going to arrive. It arrives in a random order. You have no control over when that information that you've got in the test prep actually arrives for the developers. It's this loop, yeah? And we need to get rid of that loop. So, what did you have for lunch? Hands up if you can remember what you had for lunch yesterday. Yeah, that's pretty good. About half of you. Hands up if you can remember what you had last Friday for lunch. These people are weird. Okay, Okay, hands up if you can remember what you had a month ago, Friday, for lunch. Do you have the same thing for lunch every day? So you have the same. Okay, what about Thursday a month? No, you can't. And so this is one of the problems that we have with that arrival loop with the software, is that the developer's kind of doing all the coding, and they really get their head into it. And one, I don't know if you found this, but if you make a developer a Scrum Master, you've got someone who needs to kind of spend an hour thinking about the problem. Then they perhaps spend about 15 minutes then they spend half an hour understanding that part of the code, and then they spend 15 minutes working out what to do. They spend 30 seconds actually coding, and then they spend 10 minutes cleaning up and checking all the tests in and stuff like that. Well, if you ask someone, you did this thing yesterday and we checked it doesn't work, can you fix it? They remember, because it's a bit like remembering your lunch from yesterday. But if you ask someone to fix something that was a month ago, they might as well be a different person. And they've got to go through that whole process again of, okay, I'm going to spend an hour to understand the code base and the problem, and I'm going to look and so it's a much bigger thing. So these little fixes that should be really quick are taking a long while. So we need to fix that. And so it's fairly obvious to me that what should be happening is the analysis and the test preparation are part of the same process. Yeah. How many of you guys are doing this at the moment? Yeah, it's great, isn't it? So the business analyst, if we've got them, or the product owner and the tester are working together to actually come up with the specification, in that give or when then form, that goes into code. And it means that very quickly from there it goes into test execution, and they get that feedback. So we're not waiting a month and trying to remember what we had for dinner a month ago. We can fix it now. And so one of the kind of problems that I have with this metaphor of the tester being the person who measures things and gets things right is I think it's the wrong way of thinking about this stuff. Yeah? Because what we've really got is we've got a jelly here that wobbles around, and that I think is a better metaphor for software than a nice screw that's fixed and we have a very clear defined requirement. Instead we've got a jelly, and then we've got the jelly mold. And how ridiculous is it that we're trying to measure the jelly? Because depending on how much pressure it's going to be, and we're going to get a different result. Instead, I think testers are actually jelly mold makers. Yeah? So I want you to say this, everybody. I am a jelly mold maker. I am not a jelly measurer. So come on, everybody, say, I am a jelly mold maker. I am not a jelly measurer. Yeah? And that's the way you've got to think about it. You're about making jelly molds. You're not about getting a precision instrument to test jelly, because that's what software's like, isn't it? It changes every day, just like jelly. Okay, the other thing that testers are great at is this. Yeah? The black hat. Edward de Bono. Yeah? Have you ever noticed when you speak to a product owner, they've got the happy hat. Yeah, this will work. Yeah, but the testers are great because they go, but what if the user's an idiot? What if the user does the wrong thing? And the happy hat goes, no, the user never does the wrong thing. Do they? Things never go wrong. No one ever unplugs the machine halfway through running the execution. No, we don't have to worry about that. And so what you find is that having the product owner with the tester, you get this really nice balance. You get the happy path, hey, all I care about is business value, let's just get this thing into production as quickly as you can. And then you get the tester who's got this black hat on, who goes, no, the user can be an idiot. The user could press escape at just that wrong moment, and come on, the user would never be stupid enough to do that. And what you find is that a lot of organizations, they focus on this happy path thing. The product owner is the one who's going, this is what the software should do, this is what my process should do. A few years ago, I had a run-in with an airline. So I was going on holiday with my partner, and looking forward to a nice, restful week away. And we turn up at the gate, And when we get to the gate, they go, right, everybody, we've got some bad news. And we've got a really nice, chilled out week planned. We'd even made sure our days were good. They said, we've got some bad news. Your flight is delayed by 6 hours. And I said, what do you mean it's delayed by 6 hours? And they went, oh, look, if anyone's got any questions, if you go back to the main terminal, the information desk has got more information and they'll tell you everything that's going on. And so like 300 people just ran away from the gate to the information desk. And when we got to the information desk, the guy went, why are you guys here? I don't know anything about it. And we're like, but we were told to kind of come and talk to you. They said, oh yeah, they do that to get you away from the gate. And so, you know, years ago I'd just get angry. So I did the modern thing. What would you do in this situation? Twitter, of course. So I said, Monarch are a bunch of arseholes. And they ignored me, of course, and then Bob Marshall, who's got 10,000 followers, he retweeted it. And all of a sudden, Monarch were following me on Twitter. And I thought, right, okay. So I told them, I even wrote a blog post about this. I told them, look, this is what's wrong with your process. Because their response was, hey, well, hopefully come back next time and everything will work and you'll really enjoy the experience. And I said, you're missing the point. The quality of your experience is what you do when things go wrong. Yeah? And this is what the testers are great at, because they think of all those things that can go wrong. And just think how easy it is for an airline to improve that experience. Instead of, hey, we just want to get you from a gate, we're going to trick you, move you over there. They go, here's a phone number. It's our call center. We just rang them 2 minutes ago to say that your flight is 6 hour delayed. Call this number and one of our operators will call ahead to make sure that your hotel, your car, your friends, your family, and your destination, and then they will ring you back. What a much nicer experience. But the product owner won't think of that. But who will think of that? The tester with their black hat. Yeah? So you are part of that product team. Okay? So here's a quick question for you. Now you see why you've got the red and the green cards. How many of you think you're a tester, and how many of you think that your role is to be the product quality designer? Red card or green card? Come on, no hiding. Red card, green card. Yeah. What I love is quite a few of you have got both cards up. I love that, because I was trying to force you down this path, but you're right, you're both. But yeah, it's about, you are not a tester, you are part of that product team, and you're about specifying the quality of the product. And by doing it at that point, we can now start scheduling when we start building some of that stuff, rather than it just hit us because we've tried using we've tried using the software and it doesn't work the way we want, and we're kind of now trying to put it in as bugs. And we get that, these are not the bugs you're looking for kind of response. So, 2 + 2 = 4. Who should test this? Yeah. Should you guys be testing this kind of thing? Yeah. Anyone think they should be testing this kind of thing? Unfortunately, the kind of state of the art in many organizations is we manually test everything. Yeah? Stuff like this. We shouldn't be testing stuff like this. Who's good at testing stuff like this? And no one saves someone in India. Computers. Yeah, computers are really good at testing stuff like this. So why don't we tell the computer before we start, this is the test we want you to do? This is really where we're going to need testers. Yeah? Does anyone know why birds fly in that formation?
More efficient.
Yeah. So what happens is, if you fly in the slipstream of the bird in front of you, it requires 20% less effort. And as a result, this is the pattern that emerges. But we could not have predicted that. Yeah, it's one of those things that we see the pattern, and then from seeing the pattern, we actually go and understand why it's happening. And I think this is where you've got to be doing the manual testing. So it's not a case of, we're always going to do automated testing, or we're always going to do manual testing. It's a case of understanding. And I think a lot of people in this audience understand that distinction. This easy Cynefin framework, data node. Who's come across the Cynefin framework before? Okay, this is a great framework. I first came across it in 2002, even before I think I encountered Agile, and I hated it for about 12 years. Absolutely hated it. I just thought it was just rubbish. And unfortunately now I can't stop thinking about it. So it's one of those things, it's a bit of malware that once it gets in your head you can't uninstall it, because I've tried. And there's several empty bottles of vodka to prove that I've tried, but you can't get it down. So if you really want to know about Cynefin framework, my advice is go and watch about a dozen of the videos by Dave Snowden. So there's loads of stuff on YouTube and Vimeo. And the reason is because it's a really powerful model, but you have to get past the language. And the way that we learn language is through repetition. So the first time you hear it, it will make no sense. Yeah, quite literally. And probably it takes the first 3 or 4 times you watch it, it will make no sense. But after a while, you'll get used to the language that's being used. And each talk is slightly different, so you get to appreciate what it's about. It's actually quite a simple model. So you divide between these things on this side. The complicated and the obvious are things where the outcome is knowable. Yeah, you can know in advance what the outcome will be, the response will be. And that's split into 2 domains. The first domain is obvious. This is where just anyone would know. Yeah. The second domain is where things are complicated. So this is where you need an expert, or you need to do some analysis to work out what's going to happen. But this is the knowable space. This is a really good space for automated testing. On this side, we have the complex space. Yeah. And so in the complex space, we cannot predict what will happen. We cannot know in advance what the outcome will be. However, we can look back and go, that makes sense, we can understand why. So it's a bit like the birds. We cannot predict the way that birds will form into flocks, but once we've seen how they form into flocks, we can work out why, yeah? And we can see the steps that lead to that. And this is the realm of where what we do is we do multiple safe-to-fail experiments. So we're trying things out to see. We have hypotheses of what might happen, but we don't know. And then finally there's chaos, which is where there's not enough constraints in the system to actually form any forms of patterns, and sometimes you just need to act. So when we're doing our manual testing, this is really the space where we should be looking at doing our manual testing. And once something becomes predictable, so actually some of the problems start in the complex space and then they migrate across to the complicated space. So once we've identified that the birds are flocking in that formation, we can test to make sure that they always flock in that formation. Yeah? But we can't predict in advance. And this is where we want to be doing our manual testing. Okay. So given when then? So who in the game who knows given when then? Yeah. So given when then is a pattern to help you communicate between domain experts and developers. And the interesting thing is that when Dan and I came up with it, the idea was really that domain experts would be specifying the tests in the form of given when then. So what this is, if you look at it, is Dan and I realized that this test-driven development, as it was at the time, was really cool. But the language that we had meant that the domain experts found it difficult to interact with the developers. So the developers were writing all these cool automated tests, and they'd be set up some conditions, run, and then assert that they were true. The problem was that these tests were all written in Java and C# and stuff like that, which wasn't necessarily the language of the domain. Yeah? And the domain experts over here could not understand that language. However, the developers really didn't know enough about the domain to come up with good quality tests. And so we wanted a language to enable the domain experts to communicate with the developers. And so, given when then is simply, this is set up, run, assert. Yeah? So, all we're doing is the way that the the developers are writing code, we push that into the way the domain specify it. So we taught the domain how to speak the language of test-driven development. And so given when then maps directly to that developer thing, so that we can get domain experts specifying the tests rather than the developers, so people who really understand. Now, what's interesting is that when we talked about domain experts, primarily we were thinking of kind of business analysts, product owners, and testers. But interestingly enough, it tends to be more the testers who have really picked up on this kind of format, more than the product owners. And what you often find is it's the testers who are driving this process with the product owners. So I'm going to let you into a little secret. Yeah, because does anyone find this hard sometimes? Because this is quite a tricky thing to do, isn't it? Yeah? This is quite hard to do. So I'm going to teach you how to do this easy. Yeah? When you're actually creating the given when then statement, you start by writing the then. So you start with the output. Yeah? Once you've done the then, you then think about, what are the things that might actually cause that to happen? Yeah? Because what happens is when we start given when then, is we automatically, without realizing it, start deleting options. Whereas going backwards, the process nicely supports us and says, okay, then this is displayed on my phone. So when is that displayed? And I think, well, there's perhaps a few different ways that that's displayed. It's displayed when I click on that button and it shows up, or it is displayed when I kind of come here from clicking on a link in an email, or it clicks when I'm in the proximity of something. Yeah? For three very different kind of scenarios. Once we know that, we can then say, okay, well, what needs to be set up in order for that to happen? We can focus on the given. If you try and do it the other way, what happens is you get this horrible situation where there's no way to capture all those things neatly, and you start worrying about dropping things and have you got full coverage. It just makes it very simple and elegant. So that's the kind of the freebie I'm giving you this morning. Then, when given, when you're creating them, even though the way they're implemented is given when then. So the thing about given when then, in that community, we've got specification by example. And Goico introduces to this concept of the three amigos. Who's heard of the three amigos? Yeah? Great. So the three amigos is the idea that when we're creating our kind of given when then format kind of specifications, it's all about a conversation around examples. Yeah? So we create this example. And the three amigos are the product owner, the developer, and the tester. Yeah? But, so the product manager, developer, and the tester. What we're starting to see is that isn't the three amigos anymore. Yeah? So when we talk about the three amigos now, what we're seeing in a lot of companies is this is the three amigos. For those of you who can count and are testers, that might offend. So the three amigos now is not just the product manager, the tester, and the developer. We also have a UX designer who needs to be part of that conversation. And we have a data analyst who needs to be part of that conversation. And we need a UX researcher who needs to be part of that conversation. Oh, and by the way, the IT architect is also in the product owner team, and they need to be part of that conversation. And the guy who's responsible for security in the organization, they are also part of the team, and they need to be part of that team. And of course, the problem is that now, instead of like three people just gathering around, kind of agreeing something, what we've got is a group of people. Now, what happens when you get a group that big? Pardon? Chaos. Yeah. So we need someone to keep them in line. Now, it's great because someone said that like they're facilitated for the development. But let's think, we need, if we've got this many people, when we have these meetings, we need someone to facilitate those meetings. That's one of the things that we know very much from the development side, but we're not doing it on the product owner side because previously there'd just been the three of them getting together. Now, we've got like 6 or 7 people in the room and potentially several dead. We need someone to facilitate this meeting. So let's see, who are the good facilitators in this group? Is it the product manager? Yeah, as we know, and I'm picking on the male product managers here, all they really care about is handbags. You know, they're like, I'm the product manager, I just care about value and customer and stuff like that. Yeah. What about the UX designer? Are they a good facilitator? No, I'm a creative. I don't want to constrain things. I see this meeting as my garden. No, it's not going to happen. What about the developer? Can someone turn off the lights and can those people in the room please go away? The data analyst. Oh, yeah, but if they spoke English, they might be a candidate, but as it is, it's just numbers. And what about the UX researcher? I'm an ethnographer. I like to watch. The ethnographers, they don't like to interfere with the culture, so they're not going to try and shape it and mold it. So who's going to have to facilitate this mess? I'm sorry, but it's you guys. Because you're the only ones with any discipline in this crowd. Yeah? So it's not about facilitating the developers, it's about facilitating the product management team. Yeah? I'm sorry to say this, but this is one of your jobs. Yeah? But not with developers who kind of have a little bit of discipline. Yeah? Yeah? Because they don't like meetings, they don't like talking to people, so they make sure they happen very quickly. You're now putting together a group of people who love meetings, who just love to talk. So, yeah, you're going to need to facilitate. So, this is how I now think of that whole software development piece. So in the middle we have the build the thing right team. Yeah? These are the people who make sure that the product is built in a way that's sustainable, that they're building it in short increments, and all of that good stuff. Clean code, high quality, blah, blah, blah. We then have the build the right thing team. Yeah? And this is anybody who interacts with customers. So let's think about that team. So yeah, we've got our UX designers, we've got testers, we've got our developers, we've got some developers, we've got our architects, we've got our security, we have our call center agents. Yeah? Who's had a Tom Peters? Who remembers Tom Peters? Yeah, this is showing our age, isn't it? So Tom Peters was like the guru of the 1980s. Yeah, he was the business guru of the 1980s, like Simon Sinek and all those people, Dan Pink, but in the 1980s where we wore power suits. And I remember watching the talk he did, he said, you know, you have this multi-billion dollar company. They spend millions and millions on marketing. Yeah? Oh, that's another group in the build the right thing, because they're interacting with the customers. They create this amazing value stream, yeah, with all these expensive computerized things to deliver your product to your customer. And the guy who delivers the product to the customer is a guy who smells slightly of alcohol, is soaking wet after walking in from the rain in his jeans and t-shirt, and he traipses across the front of your foyer, across the marble floor of your billion-dollar headquarters, and dumps a soggy package on the receptionist's desk and say, that's from our company. Yeah? Everybody who interacts with the customer is part of that build the right thing team. Yeah? So, and then we have the customer. So which team are you on? Are you on the build the thing right team? Or are you on the build the right thing team? So come on, let's see.
Both.
Yeah? Cool. I think more. I was hoping you'd all go for the, oh, we're in the build the right thing team thing, because I've been cheating, pushing in that direction. You're actually in both. Yeah? But there's an interesting thing about that diagram, because when we look at that diagram, there's another group on here, which is the customers. And when we're developing our product, what we tend to find is that the UX researcher is kind of considered the voice of the customer, aren't they? They're watching them intently, or perhaps we're looking at our data. But what they're doing is they're studying the customer. Yeah? They're not really the voice of the customer. Yeah? And sometimes it's hard to actually get time with the customer. Yeah? Or perhaps we can't speak to all of our customers. Yeah? And we try to get this perfect experience. But in actual fact, what we really need is something that's good enough. And that's your job too. As a tester, you are the imperfect customer, because you're trying to channel the customer's experience and saying, I've listened to this UX person who's been studying them and I understand what they are. I am the proxy customer. I am the person pretending to really be the customer, as opposed to the person who flicks in and goes, oh yes, that's a lovely screen. And off they go, I'm off to lunch now. No, you're the one who sweats and cares and wants to be the customer. So not only are you in the build the thing right team, not only are you in the build the right thing team, you are also the customer. So that's our kind of image of what a tester is. And you know what? We don't need those testers, because a lot of the time we can replace them with a computer. What we really need is testers. This is a hard job. Yeah? It's one of the hardest jobs in the whole process, because you're everywhere and you've got a lot to do. And I'm just going to leave it with that. Okay? So thank you, testers. Do you have any questions at all? Okay. So, here's one.
Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Thanks for that. You mentioned a message you got a retweet from Bob Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been quite vociferous recently about the value of testers and testing. And I wondered, A, if you'd seen those tweets, or whether you followed his view and seen them, or what your comments on that, and whether we actually should exist. As I clearly see you do, but I just wondered what your kind of answer to some of those comments might have been, if you've actually followed them at all, or is it something you've not seen?
Yeah, kind of Bob's a bit like an alcoholic. He doesn't actually drink alcohol. But if you actually meet Bob in person, he's a really lovely person. He's really, really special and wonderful. But if you give him a drop of Twitter, he changes into someone that you don't want to associate with. He's actually the only person who I've blocked on Twitter. But the story is actually from a few years ago when I was kind of following, but the things he follows. There's a curious thing now, which is that Bob has got an audience. Yeah, he's got like tens of thousands of people who are following him now. And a lot of that is just because he's so prolific. He just puts out so much stuff all the while. It makes me wonder how he gets to be on The Apprentice, which was kind of his photo for a while, when he's tweeting so much stuff. But he's got this huge audience. And I think sometimes it's a bit like Kim Kardashian. You know, he'll do anything just to kind of like get attention. Yeah? I think, my personal view is that tester is probably one of the most important roles. It's the most undervalued role. I think Agile has gone a long way to actually elevate the status of the role, but I think what we haven't really seen is a realization that actually, even though the test is important, they're even a lot more important than most people realize. I had a project where there was, as an Agile coach, I was asked to come into one of the projects as they said, oh, we've got a real problem because the product owners are crap at their job. And go, right, okay, so I went into the project and said, well, what's happening? And they explained, they said, well, the problem is the product owner's doing the analysis, they're chucking it over the fence, and they haven't done all the job. And so the testers are having to do their job, and it's rubbish. And I said, your problem is perception. See, your problem is you're thinking of it that you're a tester. I said, you are so much more important than that. You're actually part of the product owner team, and your job is to actually specify those kind of quality states. You're responsible for specifying the quality of the product. And once the testers actually realized that actually, yeah, they were doing this really important job that the product owner probably couldn't do, they felt better about themselves, and all the problem went away. So all we did was change the perception of the testers that they weren't just these people trying to protect production against bad software, but they were actually an important and vital part of the product development process. And once they are part of that team, a lot of those problems go away. And you can tell the products that don't think of their testers as part of the product development team because they're crap quality products.
Let's take one more short question.
It will be a short question, but a long answer. I hope you understand that.
So I think it's interesting that you point out the way that various other roles are sort of stereotypically unsuited to perform these important value services that testers bring. I wonder why, is there a possibility that testers protect them from having to grow into that space, and that maybe testers in those roles or systems that moved a little bit so that there was space to become more tester-like would mean, yeah, the PM can be a great facilitator and really think about failure modes, and that the presence of a tester in the organization means that they'll just never get that way?
I think I have a problem with some of the orthodoxy around, we're going to have these people who can do everything. I think it is good that we've got people who are generalists who can do everything. I think it's also very difficult to do two different types of tasks at the same time. So it is very difficult to be very happy Pat and very positive about doing something at the same time you're trying to destroy it. Yeah? But having two people that can perhaps swap those roles is valuable, but in the moment, one person can't do both. It's like management. Yeah? I tend to think of management as the risk managers now of the organisation. And it's like the catcher in the rye. While the kids are running around chasing each other, having fun, they're not looking for risks and they're not aware of the cliff. The manager stops them and says, are you aware of this cliff? They're like, yeah. How are you going to manage that risk? And the kids go, yeah, well, we'll just avoid the cliff. And it's like, no. When you're chasing after someone really hard and really focused, you're going to forget about it and you're going to run off the edge of the cliff. So I would want you to manage that. Even though we want people who can do lots of different roles, we also need to appreciate that in the moment, we probably benefit from having people with two different mindsets in the moment. So the idea is obviously you've got a tester who can switch roles with the product owner. And that's really where it's coming. But what you see is as we're scaling organizations, that product owner team 5 years ago would be one person. 5 years ago, we used to have a product owner. Then we had we realized that actually the product owner needed to work with the tester and the developer. But that's a very inward way of looking at the software. And now we're seeing product owner teams where there's UX designers, UX researchers, and also. And what's interesting is that the UX designers in the market are generally people who have experience with product ownership. But their real interest is being in a UX designer, and the product owner is someone who has done UX design in the past, but their real interest is in product ownership. And you get all this clashing, yeah? Because they don't understand how the two roles can operate differently and apart. Yeah? So I think it's important to understand the value of the different roles and how they interact, even if everyone in the team has got those skills and they swap place. Yeah? Sorry, that was a long answer, wasn't it?
It was a good answer. So
I
thank
thank
you.
you.
Let's give one more round of applause.